I'm just waiting for the crowd to come dashing up. Anyway, I wasn't quite sure the nature of this, so let's just see how it goes. But I was given a short time to talk about being a father and try to create a pro-life culture in the family. So really, I thought it might be a conversation, so we'll see if that's possible or not. But I thought there were a few areas that I thought I'd like to touch on. And one of the things the organisers have asked is to have some practical tips. I'm hoping through that we can touch on things that might be practical, and I'm open to tips as well. So yeah, please do that. So I thought what I would say a few words on some aspects. I thought one, and I see that some of now that I've seen all the workshops listed out, so you're maybe hearing these in other workshops as well. But I thought, first of all, understanding that we need to inoculate your children against the culture. I suppose that would be my starting point for me. Bringing up my children. I think that was when I speak to many of people of similar age to myself or with children, and they say, "Oh, how come your children are still practicing, or how come they're on side on abortion or homosexuality? How did you do that?" My starting point was always, well, I'm going to have to inoculate them again, because there is a tide trying to take them in a particular direction. So you need to realise, how does that tide work, and how am I going to resist it? So I thought, talk about that. Then another aspect I thought would be worth saying some words on would be a bit about consistency of your life. Because one of the key things you are going to do as a father is be a witness to your children. So it's that role of witness. So I thought we'd say a few words on that. Then another important aspect, I suppose, James, does it affect you if I move about? Not too much, okay. Yeah, I always feel if I do this as a barrier, and I'll cower behind it. So I'll try and be braver and step out in front of it. So the fact that you are a role model in the family, and it's really vitally important, because your children will be looking to you for a lead. Everyone you interact with in some way will be expecting something, or you're giving some message to people when you interact with them. But never is that more important than in your own family. They're looking to you as your primary business. So I think we say consistency of life for you. Then the other challenge we face in our day is the understanding of the dignity of the human person. So I think children really need to understand what a human person is. So I think trying to instill that in them, and instill in them that every human being is important. How do we do that? How do we manage to do that? So there's a challenge in doing that. Part of the aspect, in fact, when I saw this in the email saying obviously talk about this, I thought, I don't know about that. I don't know how to talk about that. It was about how to talk to your children about sex and relationships. So anyway, I'll say a few tips I've got 6 daughters, so I've had, my wife has to take sometimes the burden of the daughters. And I've got one son, of course. He was first, and then I thought we're going to have all these boys, and then it was like 6 girls in a row. Can be handy sometimes. One time we went to swimming baths, and it was segregated swimming, and it was male or female. So my wife had to take 6 girls one side, and I walked in with my son, and she came out sweating with the kids all there. So sometimes it's a benefit, but I don't get to watch films on TV like Deighan or anything like that. Just that is over. So it's all sort of these chick flicks, I'm afraid. And then finally, the other thing I thought I'd say a few words on is the spiritual dimension. I think it's a huge... we're in the middle of the focal point of a spiritual battle. And I think it's important to realise that, especially if you're looking at this from the context of the pro-life movement. And I sometimes like to think in common sense terms of just like put myself in the shoes of my enemy. And I just think, okay, if I were... I've been told some of you might not be Christian or different denominations. We can have a discussion about that if that's not the case. But anyway, I just think there's some evil force somewhere in the universe, and if that evil force wants to inflict evil, where is he doing it most effectively just now? And surely it's in the destruction of the human person right at the very start. And to get those who should be nurturing that child to kill their own child, that is a huge investment. And if you're going to challenge that, then you've got a fight in your hands, because you're challenging his biggest sort of income source, if you want to think of it like that. So I like to think about it sometimes in those terms. And I was hoping I only saw Aaron was giving a talk on spiritual warfare, so I thought I should get there and get some tips. But anyway, I missed it. So watch his video if it's on. So anyway, let's get into some of that. Again, just keep me right on time. So I've got until 1:05. Okay, well, I'll be able to tell from James's body language if I'm getting too late. So I think one of the things I think we really need to realise today, a friend of mine who ran these big businesses once said to me, and I thought he was a bit cynical at the time, but as I've grown older, I've sort of thought that he's right. And that is, he said, John, 95% of people don't think. So that was it. He says, 3% of people think they think, and 2% think. That was what he says. So 95. He actually said the 95%. He said they would rather die than think. Yeah. So, but we certainly live in a time of. Alistair MacIntyre would have called it. He's a Scottish philosopher. Some of you might be aware of, but he'd have called this the time of emotivism. And everyone uses emotivism. And his argument was that we don't have a shared value system where we can actually have dialogue with people on ethical issues. So if you can't dialogue with someone intellectually, it's got to come down to emotion. And you've got to out-emotion the other person. Go, oh, well, he played a 10, I'll play a jack. And then, I'll play an ace. I was in a hotel a couple of years ago. Sometimes you're used to all this stuff, but sometimes you get, give us a break. I walked into the bathroom in the hotel, and it had a sign on the wall saying, "Save lives." And I went, save lives? Well, I'm willing to do that. Recycle your towel. And I thought, come on. I actually did write a letter. After I thought, Alf Garnett's out. But I wrote an email to say, come on, I mean, please, use a sense of proportion. Save lives by using your towel twice. But anyway, but that is sort of symptomatic of the culture in which we're living. I've got to out-emotion you, and it's about emotion. The marketing guys know this very well. And one of the things we do at Spuck is we try and train people how to use emotion and how to use the tools that our enemies are doing. So we have a thing called Culture Club. You can sign up to it. It's on once a month. You can do that online. But we train people on 5 key elements that are worth knowing because the other side are using it all the time. And that is, if people are not forming their opinions from intellect and reason, they're forming it through emotions. And typically, so the 5 key things to know are, it's emotion-driven. The best way to get emotion across is to package it in a story. So you get your messages in stories. Stories land best when they fit in with what some of the sort of brain psychologists name as narrative. But I think when I use narrative, usually people get mixed up between story and narrative. But what they mean is self-understanding. How do I understand? What's my personal narrative? Am I an upstanding pillar of the community, or am I a rule breaker? Am I forging new frontiers and adventure? And so if you get the narrative right, so be aware of that. Then the other thing is metaphor. People don't like to think about complex ideas, so give them metaphors that they can understand your idea in a parallel to some other idea they do understand. So don't get any complex, difficult things. Use metaphors. And finally, another one they use is meme. So a meme, actually, maybe. That's an example of a meme. It's a piece of information that's hardwired in your brain, and everyone knows I'm referring to a birthday when I do that. You all notice that. Other memes are an eye for an eye. Someone said to you, an eye for an eye? Okay, so someone's done that. A guy comes over, kicks your car, and you go, whoa, jumping out the car, eye for an eye, what do you think is going to happen? Well, so memes are a way of packaging information. My body, my choice is now a firm meme. And it's hard to disrupt memes because you find if you try and attack a meme, they get stronger. So we attack that, it gets stronger. It's really difficult. I do a whole 1 hour talk on that if you want to come to that. So sign me up next year for that. But so you've got to be important with that. You have to disrupt memes. So the disruptor of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was Gandhi. And he said an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So you've got to build on a meme to do that. So those are just some things to be aware of. But you need to realise that those are the techniques that are used by the media, in dramas, in books, in films, in music, and they're constantly flowing this stuff through your child's brain, in one ear, and it's sinking into their mind. So they absorb these values and they simply know them. And so we're seeing part of the culture of death embedded in lots of that. And sometimes they'll be using good intentions, so they'll use messaging around we need to look after the planet and all of that. But they're now starting to do that. Say, well, if we really care about the planet, do we really want another child coming into the world? Another polluter? Is that really a good thing? So they're using good things, but they're embedding their messages in that and just getting you. I like to think of it as if you think of our cause as a citadel, they're trying to think of every way into that, every road, every stream, every means of communication, every one of them, they've thought through them. And they're using them to swamp it with bad messaging. So as a father, you have some sort of safeguard on that. Now, the sort of thing you've got to do is, looking at what media are your children consuming. One of our things, when our kids were growing up, I wasn't sure that the balance you're doing it right. There's Bart Simpson. We banned Bart Simpson. I just thought that'd be cheeky, guys. So they weren't allowed to see Bart Simpson, or they weren't allowed any soap operas. So we just avoided that. Soap operas are embedding this all the time. Every time you put it on, you're like, oh. There's a mock now on YouTube of, they call it Equality Street, and it's everyone is transgender guy married to a disabled lesbian and all the rest. It's everything that they do to try and bombard you with this messaging. So one of your roles is to try and understand that, try and understand what you can do to stop this flow of propaganda. And your challenge on that one, I say, a practical one is, see, coming along with the rule book, say, right, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. I had to be quite delicate with the Bart Simpson, even that, or the soap operas. I had to find other ways that the kids were doing fun things. Try and displace, rather than taking it on and saying, no way are we doing that. Find something else that's on it's more attractive, or a hobby, or a club, or something like that to do at a time that displaces the attention that's been given to that. So another one, then, consistency of life. Simply, if you are going to be an example to your children, I wanted to just say just finally, be ready. See in the propaganda, be ready to respond to some of the arguments. So the two key ones that they use just now are my body, my choice. Another one they use, abortion is healthcare. Be able to explain that to your children and look for it in the messaging that's coming through. Be able to explain those two things. So in consistency of life, well, we do a thing at SPUC just now. We try and train staff up, and it's what we call it is the cores of credibility. It's what are the four core? Well, we have four cores that we use. You need to be a credible person in that child's life. So as a father, they need to look to you and think, is my father credible? Is what he's saying, does it make sense? Children can sense if there's a lack of authenticity. So you need to be authentic in your witness. So just strumming out the rules and saying that, and then living another way, they're going to detect that. They're not going to follow your path. Sadly, I know people who've just dragged their kids to things over the years and say, oh, you come to a pro-life march, you come to all this, and the kids will be dragged along thinking, you've got to watch how delicately you are, how you allow them to do it in a comfortable way, in a nice way, in a natural way, to be part of that. So the cores, we just very quickly on this. One is, so our four cores we have are intent, integrity, capabilities, and results. People judge your credibility on those four things. So be clear when you chat to your children what your intent is. Communicate clearly your values to them. The intentions you have, why we live this way, why we believe these things, why we have these family habits. Be clear on that with your children. Then have integrity. You need to live with the values that you portray to them. So try and live that out. And everybody gets it wrong every now and again. And one of the parts we do when we even study that at SPUC, as well as doing it in your own life, is you get it wrong, you've got to put it right. And very often that's saying, kids, I got that wrong there, I'm sorry, I jumped off, I flew off the handle there, or I reacted better, or I didn't fully understand where you were coming from, I didn't understand the situation there. And so show that integrity. The other thing is your capabilities. They are looking about, how capable, so as a father, you've got to take your responsibility seriously. Do you know the lay of the land? In the pro-life circles, you need to know that, because they're going to come with, say these things happened at school, or this argument came up in the class. My kids went to a Catholic school. Teachers try their best, but the kids are influenced by the culture. But very often it was, my kids have all got the same story. It was them and maybe one other person in the class against the rest of the class on every issue, every moral issue. Them, which made them grey. I mean, I say that they're, sorry if you're not Catholic, but my kids are trained SAS Catholics. That's what I sort of trained them up to try and be ready. So those teachers got a fright, when there was RE teachers, the typical too easy going with the world, or they didn't want a confrontation. My kids had all the answers. They were ready for it. So you need to have the capabilities and instill them in your children so that they know, because so often, sorry, I keep getting stories I'm going to tell you, but I won't have enough time if I do that. And the other one is results, and really in results, it's like, keep to your commitments. If you say you're going to do something with your kids, stick to that. That's how they're going to form your credibility. So if you say to your child, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be there, do that. That's part of the package. Instead of going like, oh, Dad, you always let us down, or Dad, you did do that, or you promised that, and you've let me down again. So be careful in the promises you make and the commitments you make, that it's ones that you're capable of keeping. And let me see. So the dignity of the person, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the dignity of the person. One of the things, I suppose, is instilling in your children an understanding of what a person is. So understanding that a person has a will, they have an intellect, and they have appetites. So explaining that to their children, and also explaining to them that, at times your appetites will be warring against your intellect and your will. And so they can learn that in easy ways. One of the things many of us do at Lent is think, well, okay, we're going to give up chocolate for Lent. And you think, well, giving up chocolate, that's not much, you know what I mean? But it's a small way. So a lot of life is just building habits. So that your intellect and your will seem aligned. Yeah, that's good. I'm giving up something for Lent. But then your appetite's gone, whoa, those galaxies are really quite good. And then, so you can have wee struggles with those sort of things. But those are the preparation for... But anyway, that's a context for understanding what a person is. But then, I suppose another thing to do on that is teaching your children, like, everyone has that. Every other person around is like you. They have the same struggles. And they too are challenged to do the right thing. They too are influenced by the media, and their appetites are shaped or encouraged. So there has to be a sort of discipline. By them disciplining themselves, they get an understanding of the challenges that are happening with other people. But then you can illustrate how those can go wrong. So throughout history, we've got loads of examples, when you start to think that person is not quite as fully human as that person. And the simple things you say, I forget who's the cartoon writer that says, people are people no matter how small they are, that sort of thing. But we can see, one of the things we do at Spock certainly is we talk about slavery and think there was a time when people thought having a slave was fine. But now do we realise, did that person have human dignity? Was that a human person? We've seen genocides. When my kids were first were really tiny, we had the Rwandan Holocaust, and you start to think, hold on a minute, look at what they're saying. And some of those films, if you watch them, they follow a similar pattern about how you dehumanize people. They start to talk about them as subhuman. The Tutsis were referred to as cockroaches. I don't know if any of you have seen any of these films. Those cockroaches, and you can start to dehumanize them. So because you're capable of, effectively killing someone if they're not human. So trying to show them that the fact that we have a coherent approach to that. Because there were times when people practice all sorts of things like segregation, even in modern day. There'll be loads of stuff in the media about, the black people had to sit at the back of the bus. They weren't allowed to sit in those seats. You're like, what, really? apartheid in South Africa. You've got simple examples like that. And all of it just saying those people are even the caste system in India, so you've got simple examples that I think are worth us sort of digging into and explaining to your kids. Like, these things can go wrong when you dehumanize anyone. And the only safe way to do it is to say that everyone, if they have a human nature, they have a dignity. And I think, especially for assisted suicide and abortion, now those are the big challenges we're facing, because people think they are goods now. So abortion is a good in the eyes of the world, and killing someone who's suffering is a good. So those are ones you really need to delicately think through and explain to them about the importance of the dignity of that human person. And also the fact that a human person is someone in relationship with others, and it's in those relationships, some of the people become better people because they're having to look after others. While I've been in London this week, my nephew's wife had a baby. It was born without a particular ventricle in the heart, so I had to get a helicopter straight to the airport after being born, flown straight down, and 6-hour surgery on that baby. Now, the father of that baby has suddenly had to lift himself. He's had to be a better person. He's had to stand up against adversity. He's had to sacrifice himself, and he's now taken his commitment to that child extremely seriously. The people that we are told are living lives that are not worth living make us better people. So those sorts of examples that you can chat to the children about, and expose to them the way that they're subtly making you think different. Even the stuff about the Botox, there's a sort of subtle eugenics behind now what women have got to look like. And sometimes I put it on, I think, whoa, they've got big rubber lips and all that. I don't know how they get young girls to think that's attractive. They've got these big lips and their eyelids are up like that. I think, oh my goodness. But there's something about, you can tell people that you're not quite right if you don't look this way. So explain that to the children, expose the lies that are there. I suppose that how you look and how people perceive you, I suppose, gets to the next thing to talk about, and that is the truth and meaning of human sexuality. A couple of things of advice I would say in that, just from my own children. I know we're at these events, a lot of you are diving into this, I'm sure, as much as I ever have or more. But it's important to be aware of the stages of development your child is at. And in particular, to be aware of their innocence and their modesty. And a huge thing that our culture is trying to do now is breach what I would call the appropriate levels of intimacy. They're trying to make sure that if a child gets too much information, especially before puberty, so you call that, the child psychologists maybe call that latency period, children are not interested in the other sex and kissing. There's a good film I watched a while back, and it was a man and woman hug and they're about to kiss, and wee children are there and they don't want to look because they're not interested. But our society is now trying to get them talking and thinking about that and about what gender are you. From age 4, they've literally got programs now to try and introduce children and inflame their imagination. So a couple of things I would say. So trying to respect their modesty, protect it, and watch what they're watching. And the challenge, I heard some people talking downstairs about this or giving a presentation on it. That is so hard in our age. So it's maybe some things are to teach them just certain disciplines. So on your computer, I always get these things, they pop up. Well, they used to pop up, they don't pop up so much now. And you'll never believe what Pamela Anderson looks like now. Click this button. And I'm like, I'm never clicking that button, because if I click it once, I know I'll probably click the next one even easier. My wife's done that, she's clicked 50 to find out who's the guy that played James Bond? He was in Mamma Mia. Pierce Brosnan. What does Pierce Brosnan's wife look like? And my wife's gone through 50 pages to see what she looks like. And I'm like, Angela, do not click that button, because when you click the first one, they're going to click another one. But they will get taken down a path. So it's simple tips like that, and try and protect them and warn them against looking at images. So one thing I would say is, I think is lacking, even in people I've heard giving talks on dealing with relationships coming from a good perspective. I think they need to realise a couple of things. One is sex is a sticky topic, in that even talking about it excites kids' imaginations. So you've got to watch that you use delicacy of language. So talking about things too openly, can get their imagination going, and you've got to try and guard against that. So I think that so keeping it strictly contained, how you talk about it, how you deal with it, and ideally that means that when it's talking about as you get into these sort of levels of intimacy that are sort of starting to get round the area that a person protects themselves by safeguarding their modesty. As you get nearer to that, you've got to be more and more delicate, and only the right sort of people should be doing that. So that means that mothers have a particular role in chatting to things with girls and fathers with sons. So just trying to respect that and not having to go in too much biological detail. Some of that can go out, but by the time of puberty, they sort of need to know sort of a bit about the mechanics of that, but done in a sort of private and delicate way as best you can. It can be sort of as awkward for embarrassing for parents as it can be for children to deal with that. So that would be one of the same. And I think I would say about images, I'm aware of two people who told me this, about how their lives were changed. I don't know if you're allowed to say these things, but basically these two people explained to me how they ended up going down into a homosexual lifestyle. And you don't often get a chance to talk to people from different perspectives. So I had a full, frank conversation in two of these cases. And they both explained to me that in both cases, someone had invited them to a private meeting, and at the private meeting, they showed them pornography, homosexual. They showed them both pornography. And that was one of the triggers. And so what happens with the thing about images, they're in your mind there. They are in your mind. And your own imagination can play on those images. But if there's a spiritual dimension, the spiritual dimension can come out of it. So you've got lots of people who are seeing things on television, and they can get intrusive thoughts about it. Anyway, I'll not go into the details of it, but a person was telling me recently about they'd seen some image, and they stopped and looked at the image and thought, whoa, that's a child, and it's quite provocative. Oh, and then they started thinking, does that mean I've got paedophile tendencies? So you're starting to get this, your imagination can run riot if you let it. So it's very important how you protect from the images there. Right, I've run out of time. So spiritual dimension is the last one I will say in 1 minute. I said at the start about the importance of this is a high stakes spiritual battle, the pro-life cause. So you need to be spiritually protected. One thing I'll just say, the number of people who come and do something for SPUC, as contractors, as staff, or volunteers, the things that go wrong are unbelievable. People turning against them who were their friends, it's incredible what can go wrong. So you need to be spiritually aware and spiritually protected yourself. So you need a proper spiritual life, a plan of life for yourself. So that is time during the day that you're setting aside to prayer and meditation. I can tell you things I do, but it's for you to find your own things. Whether that's getting to mass every day, or saying the rosary, or saying your prayers, or reading your Bible. You need to find times through the day. And I remember once a mother giving a talk at an event I was at. She was talking about how she prays on her knees 6 hours a day, but she had 7 kids. And I was thinking, I've got 7 kids. That is wrong. If my wife's doing that, I'd be saying, get a grip, get up and do some more. You can turn your whole life into a prayer, but it's just finding things to get God, in your life. So when you're doing a bit of work, offer it to God, offer it for an intention, do those sorts of things. I think I just read, there's a great book by, it was written in 1903 or something like that, Peter Arno. But I read this thing in it the other night, and it just said, for an interior... Okay, sorry, I'll skip out the preamble. But for people trying to take spiritual life seriously, persecution is never wanting, and indeed persecution is manifold, just as martyrdom is manifold. For there is persecution from enemies and from friends. There is persecution from visible foes and from the invisible as well. There is persecution from the wicked and also from the good. Now, I would say that's a thing that surprises people. I've been working this, it said 50 years in the programme. I've been doing this for 50 years. I've been doing it for 30 years. 50, I was saying, whoa, it's my grandpa. 30 years, and I have learned that the number of friends, the people who were friends, who turn on you, and I'm sure from their perspective they think they're doing good. And I've tried over the years to think, I don't know why people do, try not to get too attached to that. I don't know why people do what they do. Try and forgive as much as you can, or try and understand. I think, well, we just have to disagree on this. But it's being aware that everyone, I think the spiritual battle is all around. And then when it's the pro-life movement, every relationship you have, and if I were, if you think of playing chess, you just think, okay, I'm moving in for the kill now. I'm going to bring in a bishop, a pawn, a rook, a knight. I'm going to bring them all in at the same time. And you think, well, why is my computer broken down? And why is my wife saying that I'm out too much? Or why are my children saying I've got problems at school? All happening at the same time. And I've got a big event that I have to deliver. And it's all happening at the same time. So these are the sorts of things to do. So it's praying all the time. St. Paul in Ephesians, of course, talks about the armour of God. Make sure you're wearing the belt of truth. Your breastplate of righteousness, your feet fit with readiness that comes from the gospel of truth, your shield of faith, your helmet of salvation, and the full armour of God. That's the sort of stuff we need when you're in the pro-life movement. Sorry about the time, James, but thank you.